Hello and welcome. In this video, let's start talking about how to approach this one space enclosure from the 3-4 point. In the past couple of videos, we talked about how to approach the small knights enclosure. So if you haven't seen those videos, I would highly recommend because I think this small knights enclosure is the most popular among amateur players because it has such a solid grasp on the corner territory. And it's a good way for beginners and amateurs to play. But you are eventually going to see all four of these enclosures, right? So it's very useful to know at least that you can challenge these enclosures, right? It's not settled, it's far from settled actually, with just these two stones. So white in this situation can and should challenge these enclosures. After viewing the past couple of videos, now we can make some comparisons, right? And I think I'll use this video to do some of that. And the next video will talk about the actual so-called correct Joseki. So if you ask AI or any teacher these days, what's the correct move in this situation for white to approach this enclosure, to challenge this enclosure, they are going to tell you that there's only one move, and that's this attachment, which might get a little bit complicated. We'll save that for the next video. In this video, I want to get a few things out of the way, right? Get some of the suboptimal moves for whites out of the way, so you have an understanding of what could happen, right? If your opponent plays those suboptimal moves, you can respond with the correct moves and benefit. So that's the goal. So what are some potential moves that white can make? They're okay, actually, but are suboptimal. They're not that great, or situational, right? You don't play it at the beginning of the game when the board is empty, right? So, of course, white can play on the upper side by playing this attachment, very similar to what we saw. But because black has this stone on the fourth line here, it's going to be better for black in this situation. So it's not as good for white. And then, of course, we can talk briefly about these so-called probing moves in the second line, a 3-3 point. Yeah, the 3-4 point is kind of a peep from the inside. Moves like 2, 3, and 4 are not great. As we already know, right, if you're just living on the corner as white and giving black a wall on the outside, not good for white. Not a good exchange, especially at the beginning of the game when the board is empty, when there's great potential toward the center. And then there's another very tempting move, and that's number 5. This approach, right? It's kind of an approach to this corner enclosure, to this stone on the fourth line, but it's not as good. It's okay, right? You're going to see this move for sure, but it's not as good as the attachment that we're going to talk about in the next video. So let's look at this attachment first. When white plays here, now black can again play this hane, which in this case is also a tiger's mouth. And the difference is actually pretty clear, right? Because this stone is right here instead of on the third line. Black's shape is actually much, much better in this situation, right? Black can play this tiger's mouth and keep building, right, here on the left side if black wants to. But of course, if white already played this attachment, this means white wants to play on the upper side. So white gets what it wants. Now, because this stone is on the fourth line instead of on the third line, this bending move by white, number 5, is not forcing. So black can actually play a pincer on the upper side to prevent white from developing. And white can keep playing, of course, on the 5th line here. Playing the Atari is actually not a great idea because there's a peep that's potentially really annoying at number 10. So white should probably play this instead. So if you don't like the pincer at number 6, then white's number 5 can also be somewhere on the upper side. So the idea is to just prevent black from getting to the upper side. So if you want to accomplish that as white, this also works, right? And 1 and 3 can be thrown away, right? They're not very big. They're not very big. If black plays something like this is very slow, right? White can definitely, can and should play away in this situation, right? If black just captures these two stones like this is pretty small. So this is really just about preventing black from developing on the upper side, but black has a much better shape if you compare this to the small knight's enclosure. So that is why number 1 is not the optimal, right? It still gets the job done, but it's not the optimal move for white in this situation. So if you want to prevent black from playing on the upper side, you can play a little farther as well, right? This is, I think, just as good, right? You don't want to give black this tiger's mouth, which is a very, very solid shape, very, very good shape. And black, of course, should play this tiger's mouth. It should not play any other move, right? Standing down here or playing this, these are not the best moves. Why? Because third line and second line exchange doesn't benefit black, right? This definitely doesn't benefit black. If black plays here, then again, white will have to play this hane at number 3. But white doesn't have any other choice. Can't really play this. Number 3 here never makes any sense, right? And again, black cannot take number 3 because white can push through after number 5 and 7, right? This way, there's going to be a double Atari here, number 9. So this is not okay if white cuts off this stone, right? This stone is still pretty important. Black wants to connect with it. So if it's something like this, then this exchange, number 2 and 3, is not a good idea, right? Not a good idea. It kind of strengthens this white group. So that is why if your opponent plays the number 1 and you're black in this situation, you have to play number 2. What about these probing moves on the inside? We already saw this in the small knight's enclosure. All black needs to do in this situation is stay on top. Just stay on top. Here or here, and then close white into the corner. So can white make something happen? Maybe, right? If it's something like this, then maybe white can try to live, right? But none of these favor white because black is so strong on the outside, and white doesn't get a whole lot. Really doesn't get a whole lot of territory from the corner. But I think all of these variations starting from number 1 will favor black. Similarly, if black just retreats, this is also fine, right? Once again, we get to this living shape, right? Hopefully I'll cover some of these shapes in future videos. But just know that this is a living shape, right? If you want to come and destroy this eye, then number 10 and 11 will be Miai. So black cannot kill in this situation. Black can just block from the outside. And this will be a 3 or 4 point living shape for white. What about some of these other moves? You play here, then I think white can make a living shape this way. And number 11, right, will be something like this. And if black plays here, white plays here, black stands down. It's kind of tricky, right? If you connect here, then this will be a ko. Right, so black can capture back and make this into a bent 3, so it's a dead shape. And white will want to avoid that ko by playing the throw in here first. In this way, white will be able to capture these 2 stones this way, and this is 2 real eyes. 2 real eyes. So that's why number 7 is the living shape. But once again, this is just too small. This is 3 to 4 points. And black shape on the outside is perfect. It's a very, very nice wall on the outside. So that is why you never see this kind of move in the opening, because it's simply too small, even if white takes the corner territory. In this situation, another probing move is the 3-3 point. Not as good after black plays number 2, right? This tiger's mouth is a really great shape. The best white can do is actually just to have number 3 and 5, right? So the corner territory is already gone. But it's really situational, right? It depends on how white can make use of number 3 and 5. And I would say that's very, very hard to pull off for the vast majority of amateur players. So this is not recommended, right? Because white's shape is pretty broken, right? This is really about making something happen when black has a very strong moyo, when white already has a stone here or here, and then you want to make some kind of connection with the outside. So that's very hard to pull off, and it shouldn't be something you consider as an amateur player. What about this? This peep seems okay, but once again, you're playing on the 3rd line, and in this situation, black can actually just try to enclose white. Even if white lifts on the inside, this is too small. This is not okay. This is very small, and black's wall on the outside is very strong. Right? So most likely, white will want to cut and start a fight, but again, very hard for human players to pull off the fight as white in this situation, because black is simply in a much better position, right? Neither of these groups is weak, right? They're both in a good position to fight, and white's corner is not alive, right? Because this way, by just reducing white's eye space, white is already dead. So that is why you almost never see this either in the opening, because it's not an effective move, even if white is allowed to live, right? And white can't live that easily. So maybe after the exchange, white can play on the outside like this. AI will suggest this, right? And black will probably just connect here. White can extend on the upper side. So that works. But again, you're just making the 1 and 2 exchange maybe not as great as playing some of these other moves that we're going to learn. Now what about this approach? This approach is not as forceful, right? Because this is a little too far from the corner territory. Right? It's not like the star point where you can jump into the 3-3 point next, right? If it's something like this, then you can jump into the 3-3 point and take over the corner, right? This is a classic Joseki that we already covered here on this channel. But with number 1 here, you don't have access to the corner territory. So black most likely will play a pincer, right? If the left side is empty like this, the black should consider a pincer. And white should jump out, right? Like something like this, then black should block here first and then connect. So black has a very strong shape. Whites can play this tiger's mouth, right? It's still connected. Black cannot cut off white, right? This way, black is going to die. But even if black plays something like this, then black has a super solid wall on the outside, right? Of course, black doesn't need to sacrifice these 2 stones. Black can just play something like this or this, probably this diagonal move, and white will be enclosed like this, or maybe this. It's not going to be an easy fight for white in this situation. So that is why white will probably want to jump out. And this is not that interesting because white is not putting enough pressure on the corner, and white doesn't have a base, right? Probably only 1 real eye. You try really hard here, but there's only 1 real eye, right? And you still have to jump out and survive black's attack. So that's not the best way for white to proceed, right? Because you don't put enough pressure on black, and black can put enough pressure on white to attack white in this situation. So one thing to note once again is this peep, right? This peep. The correct way for black to proceed is to block here first. If you play here, then white will connect on the 3rd line. And now there's a much better chance for whites to make 2 real eyes and be the much solid base, right? So black will want to disrupt that by playing here. And white in this situation will probably have to play the Hane. If you push here first, then these 2 white stones are short on liberties, so you can't get the Hane. If you play something like this, then white will be cut off from the outside. It will have to be forced to live on the corner first, and number 1 or 3 will be under attack, or will probably have to be sacrificed. So that's not a great way to proceed. So that's why white should play the Hane here. And one thing to note, right, this is really important for amateur players to know, is that black cannot play this exchange first because white can cut, right? White can push and cut. Of course, you should still block here, even if you have 2 cutting points. That seems quite dangerous, right? You should not just play something like this. This is even worse because white is building territory on the 4th line here by swallowing your original 3-4 point, right? So black should still block, but this way, seems like black will either have to give up this stone and get something on the outside. What's happening now is that black cannot try to kill white in this situation because number 14 and 16 are the most forceful moves here. But after this, right, because of number 3, because of this setup, these 4 black stones are going to be dead. They cannot escape. But without number 3, even without number 3 and 4, black will be able to escape, right? This will be without this exchange. Even so, number 6 and 8, right, cutting off white is dangerous for black. Right, so white in this situation, white should play this clamping move first. Right, if black plays something like this, then white will still take the corner this way. So black must stand down. And now white can play in number 21. And black has this hane, right? So there's nothing white can do here. This is not going to work. But even if white sacrifices the corner, it actually still benefits white for some reason. According to AI, you can disagree. But this is just a dangerous way, really, for black to play. So not recommended. Really not recommended for black to take all this risk. If you look at the corner territory, not that big, right? It's really just the corner and a little bit of the upper side. And white has a pretty nice shape on the outside, and number 2 is cut off. So a little bit complicated, but just know that preventing white from connecting with number 1 is not a great idea. So when this happens, number 4 is okay, but number 6 is also really important to keep in mind. Just connecting here, very solid shape. This is a very good way for black to proceed, I think, because once again, white is on the 3rd line and 2nd line, and black's playing on the 4th line. So this is going to be a good way for black to deal with number 1 and number 3. And that is why it's not optimal for white to play the approach and then play the peep and try to challenge the corner territory on the 2nd and 3rd lines. And that leads us to this attachment, right? This is the optimal move for white under most circumstances. And in this video, we'll talk briefly about 2 responses, right? So there are a few responses black can make, right? You can extend either way, A or B. You can play the hane either way, and maybe even this clamping move, which we'll touch on only briefly. Seems interesting, but it's not that complicated if you already learned C and D, right? So these are some options. We can easily knock out A and B first, right? If you play here, then this is the equivalent of the shoulder hits against the small knight's move, which we've already seen, right? So once again, this white stone is very light. White can throw it away if it wants, and sometime down the line, if it wants to build on this stone, it can play a move. But once again, as mentioned in previous videos, it's not worth it for black to add a stone to try to kill this number 1, right? Because this stone is so light, it's not very valuable. It's not worth it for black to add a stone here. This is simply too slow for black. 4 stones, not doing much here on the corner. So that's, right, standing down here. What about this extension? Not as forceful, right? Because white can stand down, right? White can stand down. White is not short on liberties. This is a pretty good shape for white. And black must block here, right? If you don't, then white can come and challenge the corner territory and also building a base for itself, right? So this will be the equivalent of, after this exchange, black didn't play the hane, right? Still, playing the hane is better. If you don't play the hane, then it's not as forceful, right? So that is why you don't really want to play the extension and number 2, right? Because it's really not doing much. It's a little too slow, not doing much. So not recommended under most situations. Without playing away, right? Playing away also not great in this situation. If you play away, then white will play the hane. It would be something like this, right? So it's the equivalent. Of course, we've seen this Joseki with a star point, but if it's pushed one way to the side, then this is not as good for black in this situation for whoever occupies the corner, right? So we've seen this. This is actually playable for both sides because the corner territory potentially is bigger. But here, the corner territory not as big, and white has the same shape here on the outside. So this slightly disfavors black. So this is slightly better for white. So that is why usually black does not take sente in this situation, because you don't want white to squeeze the corner, right? But by playing 3 and 5, right? This shape was again not a great shape for black. So if you really want to avoid the fight that we're going to cover in the next video, just stand down here, right? This is a good way for black to respond. And there's no forceful follow-ups for white, right? White can, of course, can prevent black from developing on the upper side, on the left side, but black's corner will be safe. There's no cutting point of any kind for black, and this is a solid way for black to proceed. And in the next video, we're going to look at this hane and this hane, and that's where things will get a little bit complicated, so please stay tuned. As always, if you have any questions, please let me know in the comment section below. Good luck, and thank you for watching.